Okay, we're going to be moving on to consumption, the using up of resources, okay? So, before I talk about consumption, I think we've talked about consumption already a little bit, so I think as consumers, living in a consumer society, I think we understand essentially what consumption is, but I'd like to talk about a particular kind, and that's called conspicuous consumption. If you hear grunting noises in the background, by the way, that's my dog. He's very upset that he's locked in my office with me. Oh, good, he's being quiet. Okay, so conspicuous consumption, the spending of money on and the acquiring of luxury goods and services to publicly display economic power. The income or of the income or the accumulated wealth of the buyer. To the conspicuous consumer, such a public display of discretionary economic power is a means of either attaining or maintaining a given social status. So, can you think of any conspicuous consumption displays? One I tend to talk about quite a bit, not quite a bit, but one that's pretty common is a watch. So today, just about everybody has a cell phone, and if not a smartphone, that can tell you the time, or if not the time around the world, and all sorts of other information. But some people still wear watches, and not only do they wear watches because they just prefer to look at the time on their wrist rather than reach into their pocket, they'll wear a watch that might be $10,000 and it looks like a $10,000 ring or watch. Very expensive Gucci purses. These name brands are luxury goods. And what does it do? It displays the status of the person who owns it, the economic status, the social status. You might assume that somebody walking around with a really expensive watch on is has a really great job or something like that, right? So it's saying to everybody, not only can I afford this product, but it's frivolous. It doesn't do anything. I could have bought a Casio from Walmart that would have been $10 and would have done every single thing that this watch does. But the fact that it's expensive and frivolous, it doesn't do anything better, actually lends more social status to the person who is buying it, who owns it. Think about luxury cars. The more ridiculous a luxury car, the better. So something I've seen quite a bit is these lifted Jeep off-road vehicles. These really lifted with huge wheels, right? These Jeep Wranglers and things like that. I see them around my neighborhood. I live in Humboldt Park, and they have these huge wheels, but they're like 20-inch wheels with low-profile tires, like little rubber band tires, like for racing. But it's on a lifted Jeep. So the Jeep now is no longer good at off-road because it has these skinny little street tires on it, and it's very expensive to do this to your car. The wheels are very expensive, and it's a status symbol. So now you have this Jeep that's no longer really good off road, and it's also still a Jeep. It's lifted up in the air, so it's also not good on road. So the sort of ridiculousness of it is part of the point. Some of the other things that students have mentioned are like Gucci or very Louis Vuitton cell phone cases that actually have diamonds in the cell phone case, right? It's these so totally useless displays of economic might, and you can see some of this happening even in our previous example of the potlatch, where the more absurd or useless or ridiculous the spending of discretionary economic power, such as throwing perfectly good salmon and shields and blankets into a fire, the more social status it bestows onto the person who are doing it. So maybe you can think of some other examples from the United States of conspicuous consumption. Now, I'm talking about very expensive things, but there's conspicuous consumption that we all do, right? I remember when I was going to high school, this is going to make me sound really old, which is probably inevitable at this point. People would walk around in high school with Abercrombie and Fitch T-shirts, and I don't know if they're popular anymore. I haven't been into a mall in forever, but Abercrombie and Fitch back then, it was like a $50 T-shirt. And what? Yeah, it was a higher quality T-shirt than the other shirts, but I don't think it lasted 10 times as long as a $5 t-shirt. It was a conspicuous display of consumption for somebody who didn't have the economic means to buy a Ferrari, but they could buy this expensive t-shirt, and everybody knew it was an expensive t-shirt. All it said was Abercrombie and Fitch on it. So another example that we're going to be talking about that's going to bring a lot of this stuff together. Hopefully, we could talk about it is Burning Man. So I did my undergraduate honors thesis in my senior year of undergraduate school at UC San Diego on Burning Man, and specifically I studied the gift economy that took place there. So a little background information about Burning Man. Burning Man is a 10-day long art festival that's held out in Black Rock City in Nevada. Um, for these 10 days, 50,000 to 80,000 people attend. And for these 10 days a year, it's the second largest city in all of Nevada. Uh, it's entirely a gift economy, so you do have to pay a entrance fee, which is considerable. It's $200 to $300 these days. I got my tickets for around 100 and something back in 2006 or something, 2004 when I attended. Um, but once you're inside of the festival, inside Black Rock City, no money is allowed to exchange hands. There's no buying and selling. It's not allowed. It's very so everything's based on gift giving, and everybody just gives everything away, sort of like a potlatch in a way. So there's the gift economy. There's anti-consumption, where people don't want you to be a consumer. They want you to be an exchanger. They don't like corporations, so if you bring a shirt that says, for example, Abercrombie and Fitch and walk around at Burning Man, you will look extremely out of place. You're supposed to cover up corporate logos, even on your car as you drive in. They expect you or hope that you put a piece of tape over the logo of your vehicle so that corporations are not there or not visible at the event, and your active participation in the event is expected. So they don't want you to be a passive consumer, right? They don't want you to consume the entertainment at the event. They want you to go and be an active participant. This is what Black Rock City looked like in, I believe, 2006. I think the second time that I attended. So out here, I think you can see my mouse. Out here, you have the city, and in the middle, you have the man. He's very far away. This is the promenade, this inner street. It's the main street where a lot of the biggest parties and festivals are held. And out here, you have where most of us live, most average people. And then out here in the desert, there's all sorts of art and installations and things, which we'll talk more about. By the way, the year that I attended, um, all the streets radiating out this way from the center were named after time. So this street, not that there's a street there, this would be 12 o'clock, this here would be 6 o'clock, and this would be 3 o'clock, etc. And then these rings, these circular streets circulating around, were named after the planets. So the innermost planet, I believe, after the promenade, the innermost is Mars. Is that right? I don't remember. It was a long time ago. And then you'd go out, and the furthest one out was Pluto. So it was a cool system because you could meet somebody walking around and say, "Hey, come by my tent or whatever it was that you were sleeping in, because it's a makeshift camp. Come by my camp later. I live at 645 in Earth," and they would go to 645 in Earth and find you. So one of the ways that people participate in Burning Man is through art. It's primarily an art festival, but it's also a music festival. It's a lot of different kinds of things. So people spend, and especially artists, spend huge amounts of their own money all year, not just for these 10 days, but all year building these large art installations and these large mutant vehicles and all these things, and in order to bring it out to the desert for these 10 days. And a lot of this art is destroyed at the end of the 10 days. So after it's over, just like the man in the middle of the city, they burn it and destroy it so that it can't be, so that you don't come to Burning Man every single year and it's the same. Like, oh, there's the cupcake things and there's those trucks. It's different every single time. And they change the theme. Every year has a different theme, and the streets are named different things based on the theme. So, talking about the gift economy, to give you a little bit of a feel for what Burning Man is like, because it's hard to describe, there are two videos linked. One of them is 4 minutes of Burning Man, and that's just a visual of what it is like to be there. The other one is a trailer for a longer documentary that gives you kind of some teasers about the trailer, and it's called Gifting It, and it's about the gift economy at Burning Man. If anybody wants to see the entire movie, we can, or I can send it to you, but we're not going to mess with that here. So many things in this gift economy are free. One of the things that you might do is if you walk around with a cup, you just have to bring your own cup, and you can go into just about any building, and they'll give you free alcohol. In the video, which you should have stopped, and hopefully you stopped this recording and watched those videos and come back. So now that you're back, you'll see that there's bars and clubs and restaurants and all sorts of other things that you could just walk into. And as long as you have a cup, they'll give you a drink. If you have a plate, they'll give you food. Literally anything you ask for, somebody would just hand it to you. And so not only does this extend to products, like if you wanted something, here's somebody giving away bananas for free, this person's giving away advice, but not only does it extend to that, but also relationships. And so human friendship is supposed to be free, love is supposed to be free, and this is supposed to be tongue-in-cheek. There are places you can go at Burning Man that are these sort of like cultish free sex places where you can sign up, and they're anyway, those are complicated, but this is sort of a joke. This is an art installation, and it says public fleshlight. And don't worry, I never saw anybody actually using the fleshlight. It was more, and I don't think anybody would, but it's more of a joke, like sort of retroactively making fun of themselves. As I said before, the event is anti-consumption. So right before they burnt the man in 2006 or 4, I don't remember. I think this is 2006. This guy came onto stage, and he was Reverend Billy and the Stop Shopping Gospel Choir, telling you to stop shopping and don't be a consumer. It's bad for the planet and it's bad for human relationships. And see that, so they really stigmatize the couch potato consumer again, the person who doesn't give back but just purchases, the person who watches television but doesn't actively take part, right? Couch potato consumer. And they really have this emphasis on self-reliance. And of course, corporations are demonized in a lot of other ways at the event, so you're not allowed to have logos for corporations, but if you incorporate them into art, you can make fun of them. So this is McSatan's. It's this really dumpy looking camp that you can come through in your vehicle or walk in, and you can order food, and they'll give you food, but it's gross, and they'll make fun of you and belittle you and be really rude to you the entire time. So they're making fun of McDonald's. So again, participation is one of the ways that you give back to the community, where you're not consuming, not in this economy based on consumption and purchase and consumption, but you're an active participant in it, right? So this person is participating in a fake protest, but his protest is that his arms are tired. It's reflexively making fun of themselves, right? They're playing with this idea. So you're expected to contribute to this active and participatory feeling that you get at the event by getting a job. Like, I was very poor when I attended. I was an undergraduate student. I had no money. So there wasn't a way for me to build a big art installation or to bring a whole bunch of stuff to the event that I could distribute as gifts. But I wasn't allowed to just come and consume and just take and take and take. So I got a job. I was typically a lamplighter, but there's also a newspaper. You can be a newspaper delivery person. You can contribute art. You can contribute to the gift economy. You can get a job at the post office because you can send mail. They have a working post office during the 10 days of the event. So, as a discussion, I know we can't do discussions. This is not your assignment either. Your assignment is coming up. But what do you think? Is this effective? Right? You've seen the videos. There's obviously a certain feeling people get from going to Burning Man. Right? There's a reason that people go back every single year, and they treat Burning Man as like real life. But then they go back to their jobs in order to make money and hoard and build up wealth so that they can go to Burning Man and then give it all away. It has some very interesting similarities to potlatch. So the question I always ask people and as my students is the the burners are attempting to escape the marketplace. They make this place that is symbolically away from the marketplace, right? They live in these hyper commodified places. Most people that go to Burning Man are very, very wealthy people. Not all of them, but most of them are fairly wealthy. They come from the Bay Area in San Francisco and from Los Angeles in particular is a lot of people, although they come from around the world. But they're trying to escape the market in their regular lives. They're hyper focused on making money, and they make a lot of money, and their all their relationships are sort of mediated by the market. Even they feel sometimes their intimate relationships with their friends. I buy you this and then you buy me that, and this back and forth, and everything's based on money and things like that. And so what I argued in my paper that I ended up writing about this is that it's not that they can really escape the market, though, because excuse me, let me get a drink. It's not as if Burning Man participants can really escape the market, because when you go to Burning Man, they're telling you, yeah, stop shopping and don't go to corporations and all that's bad. But when you look around, everyone has very recently been shopping in order to go out into the desert and to survive in this extremely harsh environment for 10 days. It's very obvious that everybody just went to Walmart. They 10 days ago they were all at Walmart buying huge bottles, racks of bottled water, and they bought tents and they bought RVs, and they spent a lot of gasoline, which is bad, and that there's no small companies or independent gasoline makers. It's all big corporations, like they say they don't like, which they don't like. And there's actually a lot of consumption and purchasing that takes place before the event. But maybe that's not the point. For them, what they like about the event and why they keep coming back is for those 10 days, there is a symbolic escape from the market. They can feel like their relationships with each other at the event are not based on market mechanisms, because even though they did purchase a bunch of stuff before the event, at the event their relationships with the other people that are there are not based on market transactions for once, right? And this is the only place that takes place. This is the only place in their lives probably where that's true. And that's, true of us too when we go. So it does change the way you interact with other people. Your economic system that's around you really does change the relationship between you and other people. Okay? That's what I'd like to get out of this. I'm also going to point out that this is a ritual of inversion. So I will talk more about rituals later in a later chapter, specifically about rituals of transitioning people from one status to another. We'll talk about those quite a bit. But this is a ritual of inversion, which takes a normal social rule and inverts it. Halloween is another ritual of inversion. It's not normal in everyday, polite society to dress up like a ghost, knock on your neighbor's door, and demand that they give you candy or you'll play a trick on them, right? That would be considered not good behavior. But on this one time of year, this one rule, don't go to neighbors' houses and demand things, is inverted. And that's exactly what is expected. In fact, if you don't do it, it's a little strange. So, Burning Man is a ritual of inversion in which one thing about society, the ritual sort of wants to point that out and focus on it. And what Burning Man does is it takes this one thing, which is markets and market relationships and consumption, and it turns it on its head and plays with it. And it creates this space where you can discuss that and change it and toy with it. So that brings me to the last slide, and this is your assignment for the week: altruism. So, altruism, very simply, you're going to need to know this for the exam. Altruism is the belief in or practice of disinterestedness and selfless concern for the well being of others. Now, what does that mean? That means that altruism is the idea that it is possible to do something that is not in your own best interest, right? So can you really ever do something that you never gain anything from? So let's think about that. Right? There's all this human evolution that says human behavior is all about increasing your likelihood of survival, increasing the amount of resources that you can get, and increasing the likelihood that you will have children and pass on to them, all these things. Everything is self-interested, right? You are a selfish person and you have selfish genes and you want your genes to pass on, right? But how does that jive, with altruism? How do those things connect? Altruism, the belief that it's possible to do something selfless. So have you ever done anything? This is the discussion question. I'm sorry, the assignment question. Have you ever done something purely altruistic, meaning that you gained nothing from it? So let's use our example of Jeff Bezos that we were talking about earlier. Let's say Jeff Bezos donates, which he probably will or has already done, I'm not sure, $100 million to COVID-19 research, right? Well, what's in it for Jeff Bezos? Does he gain anything by doing that? Well, for one thing, all the news articles will be about him. A lot of people don't like Jeff Bezos because he's the richest man in the world. He's a massive employer, employs lots of people, and a lot of those people are on food stamps and government assistance. So there's a lot of there's working workplace practices that are highly questionable. All sorts of reasons that somebody might not like Jeff Bezos, and so he might give away all this money in order to get these good news articles out about him, in order to purchase a certain amount of good faith and good feeling from people, right? So is it true that is that what he's doing? Is he just donating $100 million and getting nothing back? Well, not really. There's certainly something he gets out of that. Whether or not that's worth $100 million is sort of an interesting question. But there's what about another example? What if you're walking down the street and there's nobody else on the whole street. The whole street's abandoned. But there is one other person, and it's a homeless person. They look very hungry, and they have a cup out, and they're asking for money, and you give them $1. Okay? Nobody saw you do it. You gave the homeless person $1, and you lost something, and so that's it. That's an example of altruism, right? Or is it? How does it make you feel? How does it make you feel when you donate a dollar to the homeless person? Well, you might feel pretty good about yourself. Like, oh, good. I did a good thing, and pat yourself on the back. So, did you give the homeless person $1? Or did you spend $1 in order to buy a warm, fuzzy feeling for yourself? So, think about this, right? Try to think of an example of something that you did that was purely altruistic. It does, and so try to answer the question, does altruism exist? Now, I'm playing devil's advocate. I'm open to lots of different. There's not no right or wrong answer here. I really want to know your thoughts on this. Does altruism exist? What evidence do you have that exists? What scenarios have you seen where you thought that that was altruistic? And maybe if you're on the other side of the other camp, what evidence do you have that it doesn't exist? How could you point out some flaws and something that somebody else might think was altruistic? All right. Thank you. That's the end of chapter 15. Oh, I'm sorry. End of chapter 18.